Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, a security awareness series. This is episode 247. I'm Chris Hanegi, CEO and founder of Social Engineer LLC, the Innocent Lives Foundation, and the Institute for Social Engineering. And I've been hosting this podcast since 2009, which makes me really old. You probably noticed my trusty co-host is not here with me today. Sadly, Ryan took his career in a different position. We're going to miss him. We love him. But he is moving on to other things. So you won't be seeing my co-host anymore on this episode, but stay in tune with him on LinkedIn, see what he's doing, give him thumbs up, shout outs. We love the guy and we're happy to see him happy moving forward. As always, this episode is sponsored by Social Engineer. So if your company is dealing with security awareness issues, especially around the threat of phishing, we have some things that can help you. We have a custom solution that uses human-to-human calls. I think we're one of the only companies that does it at the volume that we do. And we have an instant phishing education system. If you're interested in finding out more about that, you can find out information on social-engineer.com. If you're interested in the topic of social engineering, then you should be in our Slack channel. We have over 1,500 people in there every day talking about pretexting, or the psychology behind it. We have people who do this for a living that are coming in and getting help with ideas for their elicitation tactics. We even have a job board where 10 people have found employment because companies come in and post that they're hiring and other people are looking for jobs. So if you're interested in that and you are interested in family-friendly and legal chat, then we're the place for you. If you're looking for other things, you can probably find something on the dark web, but not in our Slack channel. I also want to invite everyone to take a moment to visit innocentlivesfoundation.org. If you're not familiar with that nonprofit, it started 6.5 years ago. Our mission is to geolocate, and track down people who traffic children and create child abuse material. I'm really proud of the team there. We're now up over 510 cases, which is just truly phenomenal when you think about the work that the people are doing over there. And if you're interested in finding out more, or if you're a caregiver or a parent and you need information to talk to your kids about this, all of that is on innocentlivesfoundation.org. And if you are interested in helping us out, you can volunteer your time if you want to do that, or you can donate, and all of that is on the website too. So go check that out. And lastly, if you like the music that is at the intro and outro of this podcast, it is none other than Clutch, the best rock and roll band on planet Earth. And I know I said this before, but last year on Spotify, I spent 18,000 minutes listening to them. I'm pretty proud of that. So you guys should go listen to them, even just for a few. They're amazing. Best to go take them in live, and they let us use their music here for the podcast. And Neil, the lead singer, helped me start ILF 6.5 years ago. So he's a really special guy. Okay. And if you like the content here, give us a thumbs up or like, and please keep sending in your ideas. A lot of times your ideas and your suggestions and your comments, they drive us to find new guests and topics that you're interested in. With that, let's get to the guest. This is the part that we all love. Our guest is Mary D'Angelo. She helps clients understand the threats that exist on the dark web and how to use that intelligence to bolster their cybersecurity programs. She has a solid foundation from University of Washington, where she earned a bachelor's degree, and then she rapidly ascended as a global leader at SearchLight Cyber. You might remember that name because we talk about them a lot with their help for ILF. We'll talk about that too. Her expertise, honed over 6 years, delves deep into understanding the nuances of dark web threat actors and their intelligence. Mary and her company's insights and analysis have been instrumental in shedding light on the shadowy aspects of cyber threats emanating from the dark web. Her work not only aids in neutralizing these threats, but also contributes significantly to the broader understanding of cybersecurity dynamics. Additionally, Mary has a passion for volunteering in nonprofit organizations. She was a mentor for Big Brothers and Big Sisters, and recently she started volunteering at Innocent Lives Foundation, and she uses her dark web threat intelligence to help law enforcement stop child traffickers. Mary, it is awesome to have you on the show.
Yes, thank you so much. Glad to be here.
I hear too at work they call you something. They call you the dark web goddess. Is that a title that you have? Is that on your business card?
No.
Okay. Well, that's what I was told. That's what I heard from somebody that you work with. So tell me, what is a dark web threat intelligence advisor? What is that?
Yeah. So I work at a company called SearchLight Cyber, as you mentioned. So we specialize in deep and dark web threat intelligence. And my role at the organization is to help our clients get the right intelligence that they need to help either stop attacks or mitigate risk.
Okay. So how did you decide that was your career? I mean, you went to University of Washington, and then did you wake up one day and say, I want to be a dark web threat advisor?
No, not at all. It is kind of random how I ended up here. So I grew up in Washington State. So I went to University of Washington for undergrad. I actually studied in marketing at the time. And then I got an offer to work with a company called Darktrace. So it was my first exposure to cybersecurity. And they were just opening an office in Washington, D.C. So at the time I was in Washington State, and I thought, to me, it seemed like a very exciting opportunity. So I took it, I moved across the country, and I helped grow their Washington, D.C. location. So like at the time when I started, there was only about 10 employees or 10 employees in that office. By the time I left, there were like 60 employees in that office. But that got me into cybersecurity as a whole. So I had a strong understanding of like what the threat landscape looks like and, truly the value of cybersecurity. And so after, I think a little over 5 years there, I got an offer to work at SearchLight Cyber in their dark and deep web threat intelligence, initially as on the sales side, and then promoted into more of an advisor role for our clients.
You sound like a big risk taker. I mean, you moved young single woman across the country from one Washington to the other to work in cybersecurity for Darktrace. That must have been a pretty giant leap for you to do that right out of college.
Yeah. It was, for me, it was more exciting at the time. Because I didn't really know much of the East Coast. It's so different when you're growing up on the West Coast. There is such a big divide between West and East Coast.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the difference between the North and the South that the East Coasters feel. I just thought that was all East Coast. So to me, it was more exciting than anything. And then I came to DC and I ended up actually loving it way more than I do Washington State. So I stayed here.
That's really, really cool. That's an interesting origin story. You kind of fell into cybersecurity and now end up in this really cool job. So what do you like most about what you get to do here with SearchLight as a dark web threat advisor?
So I would say, so along the same exciting themes, I would say working at SearchLight is incredibly exciting. I mean, I'm working on the front lines of it. So like we're receiving intelligence that could really help companies, if actioned upon early, to help them stop from a huge disaster. And so that to me is really fun working with, and then also as well working with our clients, trying to understand their different use cases and their needs, because it does vary. Like, if you are a small bank compared to a law enforcement, compared to like a massive oil and gas company, your needs will vary, your use cases will vary. And so then trying to figure out the right intelligence that they would need to help them with their use cases.
I don't know if you can, but are you allowed to tell a story? Because what you said sounds really exciting. Like you're on the front lines getting this data. Is there any story that you can tell without mentioning who or anything like that?
Yeah. So recently, I think a few months ago, I was working, I got a notification from one of our human intelligence analysts, and they found a piece of intel that showed that initial access broker was selling domain access control credentials for very large airlines, but they didn't specify the airlines. They just said US based airlines. And so the analyst sent it over to me for me to look at. And I'm like, okay, this is important. Like we would want the airlines to know about this, but they weren't a client of ours either. So it was hard to kind of.
You were able to identify which airline it was?
Yeah. So this is sort of like a threat actor's TTPs, is where when they're posting something on the dark web, they know that companies are monitoring it, right? So they want to make sure it's as broad and as vague as possible so that that company will not be alerted. But fortunately, understanding how they sell things, you can kind of narrow it down. So you're never like 100% confidence on whether or not this is the airlines they're targeting, but you can get to a pretty high level of confidence. And
that's fascinating. Okay. So now you have this data, you have a 99% assurity who it is, but they're not your client.
90%, I would say. Yes.
Okay. 90%. Yeah. Okay. So that's still pretty high, but they're not your client. So what do you do? Just like, sorry, trash it or?
No. So with intel like this, the intel that the threat actor was selling seemed, it was pretty big. it was pretty big. And so if it wasn't actioned upon, something bad really could have happened. And so with something like this, I just reached out to their security team and, I told them like, hey, we have a piece of intelligence I think you would like to be aware about. And, I want to share it with you. And of course they were like, yeah, absolutely. And then, we set up a call. I delivered the intelligence. We walked through it, and we were also able to engage with the threat actor as well a little bit.
Wow.
Oftentimes they don't. So most of this is done undercover work, right? And threat actors tend to they're very difficult to engage with. But with this particular person, we were able to engage and to pull more information to make sure that it was a legitimate sale.
Wow. So you go to this company that you don't have any relation with, and you just give them this free intel.
Yeah.
That's really honorable. I love that. I really do. I love that. I love that your company did that you guys did that. That's really a great way to handle that. Cause you could have just went, well, they're not a client. So, or even tried to sell it to them or something, but instead you just gave it to them and probably saved them a huge breach.
Yeah. Yeah. Because and a huge part of it too is the timeliness of the data. So who knows, they might have been able to receive that intelligence, but it could have been a few days down the road, weeks down the road, when it probably at that point didn't matter. But and karma is a real thing when it comes to this type of stuff. So
I love that. So I understand now what you mean by being on the front lines. That would be really exciting. It's almost like having a crystal ball. Like you're like, ooh, this company's about to get breached and I can stop it. Like that's really cool.
Yeah.
That must be a really fun part of your job. Now you mentioned dark web a few times, but I think for people who might not be familiar who are listening, I hear the term deep web and dark web. Are they basically the same thing, just different titles?
So that's a really good question. And some people do conflate the two. So there are different definitions, but how we at Searchlight define it. So, and I'm going to define it based off of the broader context of the clear web as well. So we have dark web, the clear web, and the deep web. So the dark web requires a Tor browser to gain access into. Like the onion router typically is what they use. The deep web are sites that are incredibly hard to gain access into, but don't require a Tor browser. So these sites would be like, Reddit, WhatsApp, Telegram, Discord, 8chan, 4chan, those types of sites. And that makes up the majority of the internet. I think it's about like 80%.
Well, the deep web makes up the majority. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Most people don't know that. And the clear web,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the clear web is anything you can find on Google, and that's that actually only makes up 10% of the
That's interesting. I would have thought the dark web was the largest piece of that iceberg, but then we always see that picture. That's really interesting. So forums that you need like passwords or access gained into, that would be considered, that aren't on the dark web, that's considered deep web?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be,
That's
even
interesting.
Even like medical records, that would also be considered deep web, just information that are hard to gain access into.
Okay. That's really interesting. Yeah. I think a lot of people will find that interesting and have learned something. I just did too. So when we talk about ransomware, where is that normally being sold and or made and bought? Is that deep web, dark web, or where are those actions happening?
So, like historically, it's been in the dark web. We have seen a lot of shift to like a ton of nefarious activity, increasing within the deep web as well. So that's why we are really big on making sure we monitor both the dark and deep web, because that's where we find it to be more of a criminal underground.
So your platform and your company, you're not just harvesting dark web intelligence. You're doing also deep web intelligence.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Well, that must be difficult if you're saying things like some of those forums and things, you need password and access. Like you can't just scrape it with a bot or something. So how are you able to get that type of data, or is that something you can't talk about?
Yeah, that is kind of part of our proprietary technology.
Okay.
I will say though, the way that we do collect our data is mostly automated. So it allows us to collect it as quickly as possible, so that when we do deliver the intelligence, it's being delivered close to real time as possible.
Oh, that's phenomenal. Okay, so thinking about ransomware, and now you're saying that there's 80% or whatever, 50, whatever you said about the deep web, and when something's moving there, how much has ransomware increased, let's just say in the last year or two?
Yeah, so they've shown that ransomware has increased about 95% since 2022. And a big part of that is also just the frequency of the attacks. So some of the other things that play into that would be like the increase of the ransomware payments have increased, the sophistication of the attacks are more targeted, threat actors are leveraging more sophisticated means, so like better phishing emails, exploiting of more vulnerabilities, and just, as I mentioned, the frequency of those attacks. So that all plays a part of it as we see such an increase in ransomware attacks since 2022.
Let's just go back to that statistic for a second. So you're saying from 2022 to 2023, there was a 95% increase in ransomware attacks.
Yes.
Whoa. Do you know the percentage of the payouts? Like how many people are actually, or is that, I don't know if that stuff is even public, like how many people actually pay the ransom?
The data on that is kind of hard to, it's kind of hard. It varies so much, so we're not quite sure. But we do know that the payments themselves have like doubled. So what threat actors are asking for, those have increased a lot since 2022.
Wow. So thinking about that, I mean, that to me seems like a crazy thing. So you have a 95% increase, maybe a 50 or more percent increase in payouts, and the dollar amounts they're asking for. These ransomware groups must be rich.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Well, and that's another scary point to think about is now these ransomware groups have more buying power. They have more of a budget.
Yeah.
So, they're increasing their recruitment. With this buying power, they can purchase more exploits. They can purchase more credentials. They can hire more. So that plays a really big part into that.
I mean, you take like just thinking about the one that we all know about with MGM, and MGM paid that group $15 million. And then they didn't even get the rest of it. But you're like, so that group, that whoever they are, whether there's 4, 5, 10, 20, they're walking around $15 million in their pockets at this point.
Yeah.
That statistic kind of blows my mind. I didn't think it would have been that high. 95%. I mean, I don't even want to think about what's going to happen this year. If we saw that last year, I mean, we're not really doing much in the protection methods, right? So what do you think we're going to see with threat actors this year in 2024?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, definitely the use of AI. I mean, we saw that happening in 2023 as well. So the fraud GPT, so it's basically like chat GPT, but used for criminals to create different like malware or different, we've also seen that these, mentioned ransomware groups have more of a buying power. So we're going to expect to probably see them being able to purchase more credentials and exploits.
Oh my.
And then we're also seeing that they're increasing their recruitments for 2024. So that can only mean that they plan to increase their attacks as well. And then lastly, that we saw, especially sort of on the fringe of 2023, was that the state-sponsored ransomware groups was huge. And as geopolitical tensions increased, you can only imagine that will increase as well.
Yeah. That's a pretty bleak forecast. So we like to move things more towards a positive. So let's talk about some things that we can do, like companies that are listening to this. This podcast is geared towards CISOs. So they're listening to this episode and they're hearing this. What can we do for protection? Yeah.
So, well, firstly, along that, I will say also good guys and bad guys are both using AI. So at least we're on the same level playing field there. But when it comes to protecting ourselves, I mean, I'm huge on the cyber kill chain. Are you familiar with the cyber kill chain?
Yeah, I've heard about it, but maybe you can, for those who haven't, you can tell us what that is.
Yeah, so the cyber kill chain was created in 2011 by Lockheed Martin. It's changed over the years, but the core of it sort of remains the same. There's about 7 steps a threat actor takes to complete their objectives. starting in reconnaissance, and then it moves to weaponization, delivery, installation, moves on to the very end.
Okay.
Now, if you have a good security stack in place, oftentimes you would be alerted of that you are being targeted of an attack at stage 3. So that would be the delivery stage. Now,
that makes sense.
So what we want to do, as companies to protect ourselves, is we want to shift left as much as possible. We want as much time so that we are aware that we're being targeted, and we have the time we need to respond to it. And so a big part of the value of dark web threat intelligence is that that's what we do. We shift left. So we go like left of boom. So the moment we see any sort of reconnaissance activity relating to your organization, that we can send a signal, okay, you're looking like you're being targeted for an attack.
So before, I want to understand this, because this is really interesting, because this sounds like a way that companies could actually take a step towards stopping this. But before, when you were talking about that really cool story with the airline, you said that they didn't name the airline. You kind of had to figure it out. Mm-hmm. So how would you be able to alert, like my company, that I'm being looked at if they're not really saying, hey, we're looking at Social Engineer LLC? How do you know that?
So threat actors is pretty cookie cutter when it comes to their, they don't really change their TTPs that often, right? And so since we've learned that, we've made sure we've built our intelligence to send to our clients to make sure that not only are they monitoring for their organization, but also for those within their sector, so that if they saw something like that, they would receive an alert on it.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's go down this rabbit hole a little bit. Give me an example of like a really popular ransomware group or threat actor group.
Okay, Vice Society.
Okay, now Vice Society, you said?
Yes.
Okay,
yeah.
So give me a couple of their TTPs. Like what is it that they're known for?
So yeah, Vice Society is known to target the education sector as well as the healthcare sector. They are pretty ruthless when it comes to their targets. They have, so funny enough, a lot of ransomware groups will have like a moral code, so that there will be some organizations that they will go after. So like, and some that they will not. So it's like, for example, some will only go after big banks and the insurance industries, and will completely avoid hospitals. Like Vice Society, on the other hand, has no moral code. So they'll go after anything, but they really specialize in the education and the healthcare sector. And they work with their attack vectors, usually phishing and like exploiting vulnerabilities.
Okay. I have more questions about the protection, but I want to just talk about this group for a little bit, because I was under the impression, like, and again, I'm not a dark web expert, but that there was like kind of a code, like, don't be touching hospitals because kids are there. You're telling me now that there are ransomware groups that just specialize in attacking hospitals?
Yeah, that's who they tend to go after.
Wow. Okay, so let's get back to your protection method. So now, if I understand this correctly, if I'm a hospital, I set up alerts to look for anytime Vice Society is on making the move on anything or selling something or buying something. That's how I would do that. Like set up those like you said, moving left on the kill chain. That would be the way to do that. Yeah.
So the problem with that though is, and this is where it becomes a little tricky with intelligence. The problem with that though is that you would be receiving, because as a healthcare organization, Vice Society isn't the only ransomware group that's going after you. There are a number of other ransomware groups that are going after you. And so if you did that, you would just be inundated with a bunch of threat intelligence.
Okay.
And so there are different ways, especially in how SearchLight does it with our platform, that we can do sort of fine tune those notifications. So if it would hit certain metrics before you would receive that alert. So, but you would also have the ability, if you have like a pretty large threat intelligence team, if you wanted to spend the time to track the various ransomware groups and to see their conversations and what they're purchasing and what they're selling, you also have that ability. But from like a monitoring perspective, there's ways to fine tune it so that you would make sure the intelligence that you're receiving is really relevant to you.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So that sounds like, and you're saying you can automate all this, or does it have to be a lot of human involvement?
Most of the platform is automated.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, because
So,
that's the most important thing when it comes to threat intelligence is it timely? Is it relevant? And is it actionable? And so two of the three of those we automate.
okay. So let's talk about those three things. That's an interesting topic. So timely. How often are you, I don't know what the word, like scanning or scraping the dark web, or how often are you getting data so that it could be analyzed by your platform?
So that happens. The time varies depending on the sites, because there are sites that know that people are that, that people like us that are crawling it. So if they see a crawler coming at the same time, the same day, they'll block it, right?
Oh.
And so the way that we have to set up the crawlers is done very strategically. So because of that, it does vary. But what I will say though is when the intelligence that we do pull, it's as pretty much as close to real time as possible.
Wow. Really? Okay.
And that's really difficult just because of the nature of the dark web.
Yeah.
It's really difficult to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I spent a considerable amount of time on the dark web because of the work with ILF. And that's fascinating to me because, getting things in real time is very difficult, even if you're in real time there. So the fact that you can do that. Okay. So you said timely. And then what was the second one?
Relevant.
Okay. So the relevant part, you covered that already. That's those alerts you said, right? Or is there more to relevant? Okay.
Well, relevant and accuracy, I kind of play in part of it to making sure that the intelligence you're receiving is accurate, because oftentimes, threat actors might post something for sale and it's completely false. And so making sure that you can engage with the threat actor or find other ways to verify that what they're saying is true. So also to reduce your false positive.
So threat actors will sometimes sell something just to make money and then be like, haha, I got your money. Here's a fake file or something.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense with knowing everything else that they do, and that would really ruin the trust factor in wanting to buy anything from that threat actor ever again,
Yeah.
So,
some are really big on that though. Some of them are really big on, being trustworthy when it comes to things like that, like their reputation, because they're a brand, right? So they have to protect their brand.
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll find other random, like initial access broker who doesn't care about their brand, just selling something that they don't really have just to make a buck.
Yeah, I've worked with exploit developers before that aren't on the good side, and you're right. Everything's about their brand. So even if they sell you something one time and it's garbage or it's fake, they're never getting money again. So they realize that if they want a good source of income, they better provide what they're promising. Okay, so you said that's timely, that is relevant, and what was the third one?
Actionable.
Okay, so what would you do? Like, let's say you got all this set up, so you got your alerts. It's relevant to you, and now you're like, oh crap, I have this. Now what?
Yeah. So that's a huge part in threat intelligence, right? So you receive the alert on a timely manner. It's relevant. It's real. It's been verified. Now what do you do with it, right? How do you action upon it? And so there are a couple of ways, depending on the intelligence, how you would action upon it. Sometimes it depends on, like, if an initial access broker is selling credentials, say for the system that you're using, you can just push MFA across your organization, right? Uh-huh. If they're selling, let's say you see, like last year we saw Lockbit was going crazy after the hospitals with the Citrix bleed vulnerability. So if I was a healthcare organization and I saw that, I would say, okay, I know now my team, our number one prioritization of patching would be for Citrix. So there's different ways that you can use it to help, to action upon it.
That's genius. Okay. Because I'm imagining, like, I'm a CISO sitting here and I'm hearing this, and my to-do list is 7,000 pages long, and there's everything on earth that needs to be patched. And how do you prioritize that? That's a really, really smart suggestion. So if we got that intelligence, how many places got popped because they didn't patch Citrix? And that was international news. You would think after one place, any CISO would have been like, oh crap, I better go check my Citrix and make sure we're not on that. That's really good.
Yeah.
Okay, Mary. So let's go forward a little on you. What's the future? What's your future look like? I mean, you're gonna continue to grow in dark web threat intelligence, and just what's next?
Yeah. So exactly that. I do want to stay in the dark web threat intelligence as a whole space for a while. I think for me, it's more about when you talk about threat intelligence, it's an evolving landscape, right? And so trying to stay on top of it, being more involved, and really establishing myself as an expert within the space.
I love that. Yeah, I've noticed recently that you've been writing some blogs on LinkedIn that have gotten a lot of people reading them all about this topic. That was a pretty interesting. We'll put a link there to from the show notes if anybody wants to read them. It's really relevant stuff for this if you're interested in this topic. Something I always ask people that come on this show is most of us, and I know for me, I wouldn't be where I am today if it wasn't for some really great mentors in my life. Do you have any mentors that you say, boy, I wouldn't be sitting here right now if it wasn't for these people or this person?
Oh yeah. I'm really huge with working with mentors. I'd say, first of all, my older siblings, so Evelyn, John Gabriel, Rosie, they've all really incredible people that have helped me to become who I am today. And then my other mentor that I speak to pretty frequently, Larry Littleton, he actually got me into SearchLight Cyber. So that's the reason I joined the company. And he helps me to become more of a professional.
Oh, that's really cool. I really like that. So, and I did have a chance at our ILF gala to meet your one sister, Rosie, and she's quite phenomenal. She's an amazing artist, just unbelievable as an artist. And that's nice that you have that relationship with your older siblings to look up to them. And Larry sounds like a really fascinating guy. So, we'll give him a shout out on the podcast.
Yeah.
Since 2009, when I started this podcast, I've been asking readers about books they like, because we have a list on the .org version of our website where we put every book that's ever been recommended. Now, it doesn't have to be about dark web threat intelligence, but are there any books or a book that you just love that you want to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I do. I have 3 books that I would recommend. So I do have one on the dark web. It's actually the book was written by SearchLight Cyber, so it's the practitioner's guide to the dark web. So if anyone's interested in that, just let me know. We can send you a free copy. My second recommendation is, and I got this from my boss, Bob Iger's Ride of a Lifetime. It was such a great book because it talks about him climbing the ranks through Disney and all of the values and principles he's built along the ways and why that is so important for him as a leader.
Yeah.
And then lastly is I know you had Chris Voss here on your podcast. I love his book, Never Slept in Silence.
Oh, first of all, I read Bob Iger's book, and you're right. That one was a phenomenal story. And Chris Voss is just great. And that book was very pivotal for me because learning those negotiation tactics is such a huge part of SE, but it comes in very, very much in life. I'm just going to write this in the show notes. Never split the difference. Yeah, that's good. Those are good recommendations. So, if people do want to stay in contact with you and they, let's say that somebody wants a copy of this book or just want to follow you, what's the best way to do that?
LinkedIn would be best.
LinkedIn. Okay. So we'll put a link in the show notes, everyone, to your LinkedIn so people can join and find out what you're up to and what you're writing next. And this was a fascinating conversation. Thank you for giving us all those tips about dark web threat intelligence and a little bit about you. And it was great getting a chance to interview you and for those book recommendations. Really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was so much fun.
Well, everyone, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and you can join us next month when we're going to have a couple Secret Service agents on talking about crypto investigations and other security topics. So until then, stay safe. See ya.